No, it means that you're better protected against being dreadfully miserable and swamped than you would otherwise be. So I would say you have to do those things before you can even address the issue of being happy. Right? Because if you haven't established yourself in one or two of those domains, say, there's some obvious things that you could do to decrease the degree to which your life is negative that you haven't yet done. So I would say you shouldn't even get to the existential problem before you've solved the practical problems. And you may find that if you solve the practical problems, the existential problems would become bearable. Now, not necessarily. You know, because I might say, well, there's another class of people, and I would say this is one of the pathologies of being creative. So if you're a high open person, and you have all those things, that's not going to be enough. You're going to have to pick another domain where you're working on something that's positive and somewhat revolutionary. Because like the creative impulse is, for someone who's open, we know it's a fundamental personality dimension, and I have clients who are very high in openness and others who aren't. And if the ones who are high in openness aren't doing something creative, then they're like dead sticks. They can't live properly. So you know that, and I think those are the people, for example, who benefit particularly from depth psychological approaches, especially Jungian approaches. I think that all of Jung's clients were high in openness. Because I've watched my clients, I'll try Jungian ideas out on them, and if they're high in openness, they work like a charm. It just fits right in with their psyche. But if they're conservative people, fundamentally conservative people, low in openness and high in conscientiousness, it just doesn't click. Because the Jungian approach is aesthetic and creative, and lots of people aren't either of those things. So, there was another question? Yes?
I was just going to ask, can you be high in conscientiousness and high in openness?
Yeah, but they fight.
Yeah.
Especially if you're orderly. You know, because conscientiousness is partly orderliness and partly openness. Hitler was like that. He was extremely orderly and extremely high in openness. And one of the ways he solved that problem, which was quite interesting, is that whenever there were art exhibitions in Nazi Germany, there were two types. There was the approved Nazi art, which was very structured and conventional, and you know, bordered on the propagandistic. And there was forbidden art, which was really chaotic, and like often it was the expressionist stuff, for example, which is really emotionally expressive but chaotic. And Hitler would have both exhibitions going on at the same time, and one of them would be forbidden and the other would be approved, you know. So, but the problem with orderliness is that you want everything to be in its category, and no wonder. We've described why that is. But if you're open, you're always thinking, well, maybe there's a better way of putting those things in a category. And that's tough. So orderly, open people are always at odds with themselves, you know. So
I think it's like a common personality type to be like high in conscientiousness because you're really industrious, and then high in openness because you're open. But like not necessarily, like I could see why the orderly thing would be, but I just noticed that's like a personality type.
yeah.
You're really industrious and also really open.
Yeah, well, people like that are often extremely successful.
Yeah.
Right. Right. And it looks like industriousness is the part of conscientiousness that predicts long-term life success, and orderliness is the part that predicts conservative political attitudes. But low openness is also associated with conservative political attitudes. So, okay, so. Okay, so the descent into the underworld, that is basically what occurs. It can occur at any level of your plan, right? From the macro levels to the micro levels. And what happens is that it's a descent into chaos if the unexpected thing is big enough to invalidate the framework that you're using to deal with the world at that moment. Got it? And then the degree to which you feel negative emotion is proportionate to the importance of that plan to the organization of your perception and action. So you could think about it as you could think about what you bring to bear on the world. It's almost like, you can think about it as how Google Maps manages it. You know how you can take Google Maps, and obviously it's a cybernetic intelligence, right? The whole GPS search process, because you say, I'm here and I'm going there, and then it maps a route out for you, and if you go off route, it goes through a little period of chaos and then it finds another route. And so it's really an intelligent system. But you notice that Google Maps is scalable. So you can look at, probably if you're going from here to Mississauga, using a map of Canada is the wrong map, right? You want to scale the thing down until you hit the level of resolution that best represents the situation so that you can move to where you want to go. You can scale up and down in it. And so, finding out that the entire country has been destroyed by nuclear bombs is going to be a much bigger catastrophe in relationship to your plan than finding out that there's a few obstacles in the street on your way to Mississauga that haven't been marked on the map. And so anyways, you're going to be much more upset when the entire superordinate, the low resolution plans are disrupted than when the high resolution plans are disrupted. And that's partly how your mind, part of the problem we're trying to solve here is how upset should you be when something you don't want happens? And the answer to that is, that's virtually impossible to compute. But then the problem is you have to compute it, because if you don't, you'll burn yourself out with stress and worry. And that's not psychological, that'll just kill you, because it's actually a psychophysiologically damaging process. So you have to constrain it. And so here's some of the ways that you constrain it. 1, you're born with a baseline level of neuroticism. So if you're higher in neuroticism, you're going to think that smaller things are more catastrophic than someone who's lower in neuroticism. And you might say, well, who's right? And the answer is, it depends completely on the situation, and it's random. It's fundamentally random, and that's why there's a normal distribution. On average, we would say the typical person is matched to the typical environment, but sometimes the terrified people are going to be right, and sometimes the people that you can't bother no matter what you do are going to be right. Okay, so that's one. It's a crapshoot. The second is, where are you in a dominance hierarchy? Because one of the things your brain is trying to understand is, how should you regard yourself as an active and competent organism when you're facing problems that you can't compute? And the answer to that is, we're not going to solve that. We're going to distribute the problem into the social network, and we're going to let everyone else solve it. And so if you rise up in the dominance hierarchy, your brain reacts as if the dominance hierarchy structure, which is composed of many, many brains, has run its computations and decided that you're pretty damn competent. And so the way your brain responds to that is it cranks up your serotonin production and it decreases your neuroticism. And it's perfectly reasonable computation because A, if everybody says you're competent enough so that you're going to get more rewarded for your competence than other people are. And that's going to make you more secure in your job. It's going to make you more desirable and in demand among other people. And that's going to give you access to resources you wouldn't otherwise have. So, and then there's a correlated element to that, which is sort of your level of self-esteem, although that's very much associated with neuroticism. People with high self-esteem generally have low levels of negative emotion. It's not clear that those are separable phenomena. All right, what time is it? 2:45. All right, well, let's stop for 10 minutes, okay? And let's stop for 10 minutes.